Evaluating digital media campaigns, now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Bo in Shanghai. The web has become a powerful marketing platform in China, so unsurprisingly, advertisers have eagerly jumped into digital media to accelerate brand engagement, activation, leads, and sales. Well, what is surprising is how little marketers know about calculating the effectiveness of online campaigns, especially when social media is involved. This week on Thoughtful China, we'll look at the best ways to analyze online media outcomes and examine the value of online followers on platforms like Weibo. And our own PT Black will look at social media measurement from a research perspective. But first with us today is Clement Zeng, Head of Performance in China. Clement, thanks for coming back to our show today. Let's talk big picture first. What ROI do you think advertisers can reasonably expect from digital media campaign? I mean, for example, is it realistic to expect a direct link in sales, or should they primarily focus on brand awareness and brand equity?
I think from a campaign perspective, it's very logical for a brand to say cost per visit. How much did this person cost for me to deliver them to my website? Rolling back from that, the next step is obviously sales, if they own the channel. And then when I mean own the channel, it comes down to the point of sale. So if they're a web e-commerce provider, they can control the channel. However, if they're in a hypermarket, they're doing FMCG, they don't control the channel. So for them to assess the sale conversion for digital using mobile coupons, it's a little bit harder. But taking a much bigger picture look at the whole of digital or the whole of media, the idea is paid, owned, and earned. And the idea from there is to somehow shift your media budget from paid into owned, and to get owned media, your own assets, to drive or earn further sales. I think that really is the big link.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about KPIs now for online campaigns. I mean, what media outcomes should advertisers measure?
Across the audience purchase funnel, typically there are three objectives: awareness, engagement, and obviously conversion. So from an awareness point of view, we can take the biggest spender in digital, which is online video. And from that point of view, it's about impressions, it's about reach. But for engagement, I guess content and social media is really the key there, and that's really cost per action, and it's the number of friends added, that's the number of retweets. At a conversion point though, I think we're more looking at ROI, we're looking at search, and we're looking at very specific KPIs that are completely separate, which is cost per visit. At the end of the day, I think when we analyze a media vendor, we're looking at both the cost and the quality of the traffic they deliver. So ultimately, how long did that person spend? So obviously time spent, number of pages they visited, and generally speaking, if you're looking at social, how many people did they retweet to, how many comments did they make? So it's very hard to assess, and that's the thing with digital, is you have so many different outcomes. But from a holistic point of view, ultimately it should be cost per visit of that media format.
A lot of clients primarily focus on the number of fans, for example, they have on social media. What do you think of that?
I think that brand is probably really focusing on earned media and owned, because maybe their budget size only allows them to only focus on basic social media and a bit of content. For each type of brand and their level of investment in digital and in traditional, I think social plays a different role. So for example, if I'm only doing display, a bit of advertorial and social, of course, I'll only be looking at number of fans. However, if I'm a big monolithic giant spending 100 million RMB per year, social should be more acting as a CRM tool, where we refill, we fulfill, we drive loyalty, we drive engagement for those existing consumers. A BCG study last year said that 7% of your customers will drive 40% of online sales. So if you can target that 7%, create a loyal, exclusive channel offering, which is much more a marketing approach rather than a digital focus, then I think you'll solve that problem of social media.
So obviously with social media very much being in the picture nowadays, how does that change the KPIs you choose?
Well, I think it's more than aggregating, because what we're seeing is data silos. So we'll say, this is video, this is social, this is search, this is display. They're all separate. And what the client wants to see is simplicity, not by campaign. I want to see always on. I'm going to be always on, my consumer is always on. How do I keep talking to them every day? Changing that perspective is probably the biggest challenge that we all face, and simplifying that message up to the C level.
Well, let's talk about mistakes then. You've been here for a long time. So what are the mistakes you've seen about advertisers approaching their evaluation of digital media?
Well, I think as we go and we add more channels, we still have that data silo approach. What is this channel doing? What is this channel doing? We're having a very hard time just integrating all those activity into one cohesive campaign performance point of view, but then bringing it to the larger picture. How does that contribute to the sales and to the big marketing objective? So I think the biggest error is how do we clear this year of data with so much data and without any clarity at all?
So any specific examples, for example?
So I think everybody keeps talking about attribution modeling, and that really is the next step for understanding what particular investment is driving how much sales, how much percentage is contributing to that final transaction. And I think the biggest mistake or the improvement that we need to see is collecting all that data and coming up with some sensible benchmark to really understand what's giving me what.
When you're collecting data, you mentioned there are so many data out there. I mean, what is your approach to collecting data and how to utilize them?
So I think the issue is then about workflow, it's about process, and it's about using tools and technology that can help combine that in an automated fashion. Right now, we use too many humans to do what theoretically technology should be able to solve. Because of this, as we add more channels, as the client is in more cities selling, it becomes even more data and it becomes even more difficult to present a very clear picture and outcome. So moving forward, at least Performix and Zenith Optimedia have a focus on tools and technology to help with that workflow.
Thanks, Clement. Now we'll hear from PD Black with a thought or two about social media measurement.
Calculating social media is no small task. I consider it the research challenge of the decade. Now, a part of that difficulty comes from the speed of technological change, a challenge magnified here in China by language complexity, as well as the independence of the platforms. But the bigger part is the broad nature of social media itself. The realm extends far beyond commercial concerns. It's how people connect with their friends, complain about their bosses, reflect on their horoscope. This is a research nightmare, because good research relies on measuring a defined objective. So how can we assess the effectiveness of social media without knowing first what it's trying to accomplish? Brands give different answers here, but most often I hear social media is there to make sure they are part of the conversation. So let's set the objective as holding conversations and propose ways to measure it. Internally, I'd look for speed of response to identified topics, a list that needs to evolve in real time, the number of conversations held, the ability to hold prolonged discussions and for what length of time. Externally, though, there's only one important measure: the number of brand-targeted people who opt in. Could be Twitter followers, Weibo followers, Tudou subscribers. That's the most important. How do you measure a good conversation? By the audience. After all, only a crazy person thinks a conversation can be one way.
Well, thanks, PT. With me today is Jonathan Xia, General Manager Digital at Starcom MediaVest Group in China, Ken Hong, Managing Director of Razorfish and Digitus China, and Sam Fleming, Chairman and Founder of CIC. Well, there's been a lot of confusion about which KPIs to use, particularly because China's digital media market isn't transparent enough. So the information sometimes you get from media platforms are often not being able to verify it by independent sources. So I was wondering, in addition to marketers varying their expectations as well as their measurement tools, Jonathan and Ken, let's start with a look at how agencies cope with this. I mean, what is the best way to measure the effectiveness of a social media campaign, and what do you wish you could do better or differently if the market and clients allow?
Well, I think there are two things that we look at. I think one is a question of performance, and the other is a question of accountability. So I think what the real concern is that the lack of transparency in the market is around accountability, meaning did we get what we paid for? And while other markets allow us to verify that through third party, many of the media owners here don't allow us to use those third parties to verify. And I think it's a short-term view that many of the media owners take right now, because providing that transparency and that accountability is going to allow marketers to put more and more money into the digital space and take their 5-10% investments that they're currently using up to 25-30% that we're seeing in other markets like the US.
Well, I totally agree with Jonathan, but I think I also have a couple of things to add. I think in addition to the lack of transparencies in terms of data availability, I think also, I'm not sure, even with the clients and agency, always asking the right question from the very beginning. What are the right KPIs to measure? I think that might be due to a couple of factors. I think the space is still pretty new. I think we're all trying to figure this out, so that's one thing.
Right, because who has the final say in this new sector?
Yeah,
anyway?
I mean, we're all trying to figure out, I think, there are new functions and things that you can do in social media that you can accomplish different kind of objectives for marketing. So what are the right KPIs to address those things? I think that's one question. The other thing, obviously, is also the data availability issue. So maybe I want to measure that, but is that data available?
So what is the feeling you get from the feedback from your clients? What are the things that they mostly look for when they throw a digital campaign?
I personally, I have to say, like, I still hear a lot of times is the growth of fans, the number of fans.
That in itself is very sort of simple, isn't it? Just
I think
by the number.
I couldn't say that's wrong, because I think you obviously, I mean, that's I think it's a logical marketing objective. Right. But I think we should think more than just that. I think, it's, because for some of our clients, honestly, they have been in the social space long enough. Yeah. They have accumulated a decent size of the fan base, right? So at what point you should not look for a 100% growth of fans rather than the engagement of these fans, uncovering more value from these fans. I think, we start to see more and more clients asking that, but honestly, in my opinion, it's not enough.
Yeah. So how do you judge whether an online campaign is successful enough then? I mean, especially when social media is involved.
One of the biggest challenges, similar to what you guys were talking about, is what is it that should be measured? What's the KPI, and then what are the metrics coming from that KPI? And I think that what we see is for social media, especially Weibo, brands are still largely in the kind of brand building phase of leveraging Weibo. Definitely, there's they want to drive traffic. They want to drive.
They want to get fans to like them, to
well,
follow
ideally,
them.
I mean, I think ultimately, of course, everyone wants to drive traffic to their e-commerce site to sell more product. Right. But I don't see so many successful cases of that yet. It's largely about, you talk about different kind of metrics. I mean, you can measure awareness in terms of the number of mentions of a brand. Or a campaign, or whatever the initiatives. You can also look at the engagement. That's looking at the number of retweets, or what we look at is usually the retweet rate. For every tweet you tweet on your Weibo account, what is the average number of times it's retweeted? And then you can look at content. That's where you do text mining to see what it is that the brands are talking about. What is it that consumers are talking about the brand? Because you can get a lot of fans, but if you realize that 90% of your content is all promotional, giving away free stuff in order to get those fans, and 90% of what those fans are talking about is getting free stuff around your brand, then all those fans, big number, but then they're talking about you got a bunch of coupon chasers.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think, and also looking at the fans. Yes, you can look at the number. I think that's the first step, but then you want to look at the quality of the fans. In terms of some basic metrics like number of followers of your fans. We have we see some accounts that have 500,000 fans, but maybe 60-70% of their fans only have less than 10 followers. Right. So the actual reach, the reach and impact of those fans, if they are talking about you, would be less than maybe if you have half that, but you have twice, on average, you have twice as many followers.
Globally, including in China, although I think it's much newer in China, is the practice of agencies getting into data and analytics and modeling. And so many of the more sophisticated marketers will have marketing mix modeling, media mix modeling already. So they know what kind of combinations are driving volume for them, driving share for them. But I think with emerging channels, things like, even digital, which has been around only 10, 15 years now, they haven't had a chance to put that into their modeling. And I think agencies are helping them do that more and more. So if you look at a lot of the agencies, we're going out and hiring those number geeks, those really hardcore analytics guys that can tell them if this stuff is working for them or not. So I think you're right in that there's so many variables and so much data and a lot of different objectives. But ultimately, how does all of that drive volume for our clients? That's the answer that they're looking for. That's the answer that we're looking to provide.
How important are these subscribers, these followers? I mean, so if a company comes to you and says, I am purely after the number of fans on Weibo for our products, what would you say to them?
My reaction is I would like to give the clients more. I think, again, as I said, I don't blame the clients looking at fans as one of the KPIs, but I think we should understand, is this all they can accomplish with this particular objective? I also think sometimes it's upon us, the agencies, to give the clients other suggestions. Yeah, so if I just tell you, no, you shouldn't just pay attention to the fans, well, if I'm the client, I also will tell me what I should be paying attention to. So I think we should continue to do a better job in terms of broaden the clients' thinking, give them suggestions.
Help educate them.
Yeah, right. Again, as I said, like the fans itself, growing fan base, there's nothing wrong with that as an objective. But is that the only objective? I think that's the question, and so that's my take.
Creating content for those fans to actually retweet, right? I mean, or that they be willing to retweet, because that's one of the points of having fans is that they will become your media, so to speak, and retweet the content.
Right, and if a client comes to you and says, we want fans, I mean, any agency worth their salt is going to ask why. Right, so what is it that you want those fans to do, et cetera? And I think, oftentimes the way we look at it is that there are different levels of interaction, different levels of engagement that we can want or expect from these fans, and is one better than the other, and if so, how much better? Applying a coefficient to certain behaviors that they might do on a say a microblogging platform, for example, and trying to normalize those across those different behaviors to understand, is one fan interacting on a deep level better than three interacting on a more surface level?
Jonathan, Ken, Sam, thanks for being on Thoughtful China. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.
Hi there, just a reminder. Thoughtful China and Advertising Age are collaborating on a conference about advertising in China's lower tiers in Shanghai on September 5th. Some of the country's top marketing experts will share insights about how to grow your business in China's 3rd and 4th tier markets. And for the first time, Ad Age will bring its Women to Watch Awards to China, with an awards dinner held on the same day. We hope you'll join us in honoring some of the marketing industry's most promising female professionals. Tickets and further details are available now on adage.com and thoughtfulchina.com.